All right, welcome to another Buffzone video, and I am pleased to be joined by Uncle Neely, a good friend of the show and a good friend of Buff Nation over the last year. And Unc, thanks for coming on here. I appreciate it.
Hey man, not a problem. I always enjoy time together. I mean, what a year that's gone by. We met when you came to the Celebration Bowl for the Jackson State Bowl game a year ago, and man, that 12 months has flown by.
Yeah, Celebration Bowl just happened this last weekend, and I thought about that. And truly, one of my favorite games that I've covered was that Celebration Bowl, actually, because it was a fantastic football game that I know didn't go Jackson State's way, but it was a really good football game, and it was awesome, meeting you and a lot of the Jackson State people down there. So it was a lot of fun, but it has been a whirlwind year, right? And I'm not sure, any of us knew what to expect when all this started. Maybe you did because you'd been around Coach Prime, but even moving to Boulder most of the time, being in Boulder a lot, it's been quite a change for you.
Yeah, it has been. So I'll deal with that personal part of it first. Moving, to Boulder for at least a greater part of the year, particularly the season has been different. My only reluctance was the cold weather, and I tell everybody back here home in Mississippi, it is nothing like what you think. With that lack of humidity, moisture in the air, man, 32 in Boulder feels like 52 in Mississippi when it's cold. So it's a different kind of cold. I know people don't want to believe that, Brian, but it's a different kind of cold. And then
Yeah,
when it does snow, the snow is gone the next day, and you get 3 or 4 seasons in one day. You go from 30 to 70 to 60 to 20. So you just got to dress in layers. I love it.
well, I tell you what, I'm not sure if anybody's done more for the tourism industry in Colorado than Coach Prime and the Sanders family and all of you guys continually saying how it's not that cold in Colorado. It's probably helping out a lot for people that aren't skiers that want to come and visit Colorado.
Man, I've had a lot of people in Boulder and in Colorado say, "Hey, y'all stop saying that. We're already full. We don't want to, want a bunch of people, moving here outside of the football situation." It's one of those things that's described as a best kept secret, man. Colorado is a beautiful place. The views of the mountains everywhere you turn and go. The weather again is outdoor stay. I was blown away by how much sunshine there is too.
Yeah,
Not only being out closer to the sun and the warmth of it, but pretty much every day it's sunny there.
yeah, it is crazy. And I want to stick on the personal side real quick before we get to more of the football season. But for you personally, I mean, you're a Jackson State alum. You've been around Jackson State for a long time. All of a sudden, this last year, you're around the University of Colorado for the first time. What was it like for you covering this team for the last year?
I thought there was going to be some significant changes, just environmentally, but so many folks from Mississippi, from the program, as well as Coach Prime's inner circle, made the transition that, it was home away from home. You walk in the building, there's Coach Dancy from Valley, there's Coach Flea from Jackson State, Coach Thurman from Jackson State. So there were so many familiar faces with the program, on the coaching staff and amongst the players that it really wasn't a big transition coverage wise. You already had a relationship with a lot of the key members of the staff, a lot of the key players on the team. So seamless transition, man. It really felt like home a lot of days.
And for you, you knew of the University of Colorado, and I'm sure you knew of like Coach Hagan and Bieniemy and the 1990 championship team and all that stuff. You knew of it, but was there anything that surprised you, good or bad, about being around the University of Colorado program this last year?
I was surprised by how it was allowed to fall off. Just to be blunt with it, getting there at this time a year ago, seeing the facilities, seeing what all Boulder had to offer, what all Colorado, Metro Denver had to offer. For the program to have gone from what you're talking about to the heyday with the Hagans and the Cordell/Stewarts and the Michael Westbrooks and the Bienemies, for to have all that caliber of talent there in those late 80s, early 90s, and then to go to being a 1-11 program with the infrastructure in place was shocking. So I knew when we got there and saw what was already there from a foundation standpoint that we were going to be able to build something special.
Well, I can tell you that those that have been around the program were shocked that it fell off so hard too. So it's amazing to see what it once was, to what it became. But Coach Prime is working on getting it back to that level, and so we'll transition there to the football team because you and I would talk about the season, and I remember I think it was the last home game you and I were you're filming a little bit pregame, but we're standing there talking a little bit, and we were saying how, hey, they could win any of these next three, they could lose any of these next three, and they wound up losing all three. But that's the kind of season it was, right? It was they were right there in a lot of games, and it was just it was very close to being 8-4. It was very close to being 2-10, but it was just kind of right there all season. And what did you think of what Coach Prime did in his first year?
I thought it was unbelievable. I don't know if there's a business model out there where you can frown upon a 400% increase in productivity. If your viewers went up 400%, if the donations to a nonprofit went up 400%, if someone's sales quota went up 400%, everybody be celebrating. This team went from 1-11, this time a year ago to right now with 4 wins on the books. And I know that a lot of folks, when they hear Coach Prime's message, they begin to believe, like my shirt says, and with that belief, the expectation rises. And so some folks were probably thinking, we're going to get 8 and 10 wins. And that's always the goal with Coach Prime, is to win every ball game, to 1-0 each week. But we can't allow the 4-win season, the lack of making a bowl game, to not admit what actually happened in Boulder, Colorado this year. To go from 1-11 to 4 wins, to look at the increase in merchandise sales, college game day, a big noon cookoff being there, even an increase in enrollment applications, all result of what he's doing with the football program. And that's not even counting what we're about to do and doing right now in the portal in this recruitment phase. So I give it high marks, Brian. I think the season was a tremendous success. I don't hear athletic director Rick George complaining. I don't hear alums complaining. Everybody wanted more wins, particularly Coach Prime. Nobody wanted more than him. But we can't allow that to say, hey, man, that 4 wins was not a 400% increase in productivity.
Yeah, and I think that September, especially those first 3 weeks, maybe skewed some of those expectations and the hype. And I don't even know if skewed is the right word, but I mean, they certainly got off to such a hot start that when you're 3-0 and then you finish 4-8, it doesn't look good. But I think that a lot of the people that are criticizing don't understand where this program was, and you have to look at where it was before he got there. You mentioned the 1-11. I always use the line they were 1-11 and they weren't even that good. Because that one win they got was kind of a lucky overtime win, and they were blown out in the 10 losses. You look at this year, 4-8. I think it was 5 of the 8 losses were by 1 score, and that's against ranked teams in a lot of cases. And as you know, they probably should have beat Stanford. They were right there to beat Arizona and just couldn't quite finish it. That's your bowl game right there. And so that's how close they were, with a team that, as we watched it, didn't have a great offensive line, struggled to stop the run. And so they had some flaws, but they were still right there on the cusp of a bowl game.
And I think that's why everybody needs to continue to be optimistic. If you look at what this team achieved in year 1 under Coach Prime, with what it had in the kitchen cupboard, unbelievable results. You talk about that 1-11 program and not only increasing now to 4 wins, but more importantly, or just as importantly, is being competitive. When you look at the game to game, who common opponents were under Coach Prime last year, as you just said, Brian, you're losing the game, but you were in the game and lost by 1 score. That same team last year was beating you by 21 or 30 plus points. You were never even in the game. And that team was also just as likely to be 0-12 as it was 1-11, where here you have a season where a new coach comes in, starts to build his culture, lay the foundation for it, gets 4 wins, and more importantly, the games that you lose, you were in the games. You talk about that Stanford game. It's 29-0 at halftime. You're damn right.
Yeah.
You could have won the game. USC was a win. So many, Arizona was a win. So many games just got away from this team because of a lack of depth and a lack of discipline, and no sugarcoating it in some key aspects of the field, a lack of talent as well. Well, that's being addressed now. So I think the ceiling for this team has been removed, and the sky is absolutely limit, that you're going to have a much better program going forward than what you just saw with the 4-win season.
Yeah, and a lot of times I think it's Phil Steele that kind of looks at this every year, but a lot of times when you look at the teams that will improve the most, it's those that lost the close games, right? And for those that I know you weren't around here then, but like the 2016 team at Colorado won the South Division in the Pac-12. They went 10-2. The year before that, they were a 4-win team that couldn't win the close games. They were in a bunch of them. They flipped them around in 2016. We saw it with Northwestern this year. they had a big jump, and they were a team that lost a lot of close games last year. I see that as Colorado next year. This is a team that, as Coach Prime's rebuilding this roster, they're going to be able to flip some of those close games again to where 4-8 probably becomes 8-4, 9-3.
Man, I am loving positive Brian, man. There's a lot of times, Brian, I think you have a little negative slant sometimes, but today, man, you are in, brother. I love it. Look, man, you preaching to the choir, as you said, man, and this is just a fantastic upswing about what is going to happen in this program. Look at what has happened so far in this offseason. As you led the show off with, one glaring area that had to be improved was the offensive line.
Yep.
And in 7 days, Coach Prime signed 7 offensive linemen. You've had one kind of decommitted and move on to Oregon, but you still have 6, and you still have Tyler Brown there on campus, as well as some other guys from last year who had nagging injuries and couldn't participate as much or at all. So clearly the offensive line is going to get better. Offensive side of the ball, you lose as a Weaver, but look at the receivers that you have brought in. Unbelievable results are going to come from this portal and this recruiting he's done. And I'll tell you this, Brian, you talked about how close we were, and now you're looking at 8 wins instead of 4. I know Coach Prime believes it, and he believes it because he knows before anybody what's coming, which is why you saw him at the premiere for the documentary say, hey, we're going to take Peggy to a bowl game next year. So he knows that this team is built to get you 6+ all the way up to 8 or even more wins just because of what's coming in and what you have, because you still have one of the top, if not the top quarterbacks in the nation leading this team.
Well, and you joke about it, but that's one of the reasons why I'm optimistic is that you've got Shor Sanders coming back, and it looks like he's going to be healthy for the spring, which means hopefully he's healthy for the season. I think a healthy Shor Sanders with a better cast around him is going to be phenomenal. And every quarterback needs a good cast around him, right? I mean, Tom Brady wouldn't have been as good without a good defense in New England or some of the the pieces that he had. And that's what excites me about this team next year is I wish people could have seen Shor Sanders playing with a really good offensive line and a good running game and things like that. And I've told people you put Shor with the weapons that Bo Nix had at Oregon or that Michael Penix had at Washington, and Shador's in New York. That's a Heisman Trophy candidate, a top three candidate for the Heisman Trophy, in my opinion, with those same type of weapons. And I don't know if they're going to have that quite at Colorado next year, but it's going to be better.
Yeah, I believe we're going to have it. It's no doubt going to be better than what we just had, but I believe it's going to get that level and exceed it. When you look at the production of what the receivers coming in have generated their previous school, and that's something that we need to really underscore here, Brian, is that when Coach Prime got here a year ago and he had to rebuild this roster, get better talent in, it was kind of in plug and play. We just got to get some guys in here that we know will be an uptick, and we'll figure out along the way if they truly fit or not. Well, this was the real first 1 year there, true off-season, true recruiting season, and he has upgraded every position. So you're not only not going to have a drop-off, you're going to have better performance, number-wise, because what he was forced to do last year was to go after backups, to go after second and third string guys in the portal. Well, now you're bringing in guys who played, who had significant playing time, at their previous university, and their previous universities coming from, stellar conferences. And here again, I know the death of the Pac-12 has happened, but you were facing opponents this year, ranked opponents week after week, and the Pac-12 from the season start to the end was one of the toughest conferences in college football this year, and you were hanging in there. I'm totally optimistic about what's going to happen next year in the Big 12 because of the talent he's brought in and because of the talent that he's retaining. And I believe Shor Sanders will be sitting on that front row in New York next year.
Yeah. And, people like visuals, right? And I'm going to use a line that Coach Prime used. I can't remember which show it was on, but he talked about kind of clearing out the furniture and bringing in new furniture. Right. And, I think that's what he did this last year, but sometimes you do that. And then you maybe step back and look at it and say, yeah, it looks better, but I don't like that couch right there. And, I kind of don't like some of those pictures on the wall. I'm going to, kind of fix it up a little bit more. And I think that's what he's doing now is you cleared out the old furniture, brought in what you like, but you still want to upgrade a little bit more, right?
And that has been his mantra. Here when he was at Jackson State, went undefeated back-to-back conference championships, undefeated in conference. and he made staff changes, and
Mhm.
he made rotational changes in player personnel with what better position was for a guy, what he was suited for. Excuse me. So you're going to see still some changes across the spring because he knows how to rearrange that furniture and get the best look in the room. And that's also what's so important about this. I would say once in a lifetime quarterback, but certainly once in a generational quarterback. And Shedeur Sanders, you have to have things around him that support him. A lot of people try to look at this like his daddy ball and that's just his son. Well, he does what any coach would do if you had a quarterback that talented. And that means you build everything around that quarterback, and including staffs. So when you see changes in the offensive side of the room, staff wise, some people departed, some people coming in, everything is going to be geared to making sure that this once in a lifetime generational quarterback has the pieces around him to be successful because he's the engine that drives the team. And so I love that furniture analogy. We're going to set this room up where Shedeur Sanders is very comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. You didn't quite like where some of that furniture was, or you didn't like the new couch you bought. You're going to get a new one. But you're
Yeah.
right, because Shedeur to me, and all due respect to, Darian Hagan, Cordell Stewart, but Shedeur to me is the most talented quarterback Colorado's ever had. And coming in last year, I thought, all right, he's the best they've had since, maybe Steven Montez a few years ago. And then I started watching Shedeur play. I'm like, no, he's the best they've had. And you don't want to waste that. And you look at football history, right? If you're the Colts and you have Peyton Manning, what are you going to do? You're going to try to find weapons for him. You want to protect him, things like that. And so, to your point, uh, you know, there's a lot of criticism of Coach Prime, like, well, it's all about his son, and yeah, in some ways it is, because he's so good, and you want to build around a guy like that, and you don't want to waste that. And I feel like this last year, especially towards the end, they sort of wasted that talent a little bit, with Shedeur, and that he wasn't able to show what he was able to do, to the point that he got knocked out with a game and a half left, and couldn't help this team anymore. So, all the moves right now, if they're about helping Shedeur Sanders, that's great, because a healthy and protected Shedeur Sanders, like you said, could be in New York next year.
Yeah, anytime your quarterback is on his backside 52 times or more, maybe it was even more than 52 sacks, but it's clearly 50 plus sacks on the year. And that's not counting the hurries, the hits, the disruptions, the making him move his feet before the route was available to him. If he put up, right at 75% completion accuracy, if he put up 30 touchdowns, if he put up 3,000 yards under that kind of duress, what does he do with just 2 more seconds each play? A second and a half each play, let alone the 8 seconds that Lamar Jackson is getting in the NFL. It's going to be a beautiful thing to behold. And again, I got to double back on something. People just get this confused when they hear Shedeur Sanders and Coach Sanders, Coach Prime, and think it's daddy ball and that's his son. He is doing what any coach that knows anything about football would do. And that's when you have that kind of talent, you make sure it has a support system around it, because that type of talent doesn't come around every 2 or 4 years. It barely comes around every 30 years. And to your point, when you look at the history of Colorado football and quarterbacks, some highly talented, successful quarterbacks, man. And he is already, just after 1 year, surpassing their numbers, right up there with them and beyond them, and under complete duress every snap. If he gets some time, which we believe this new offensive line will give him, watch out, America.
And another factor is not only the talent, but there's been some criticism from fans about, it looks like Pat Shermer might be the OC, and fans around here have a little bit of PTSD or whatever from Shermer's time as the OC at the Broncos. It didn't go very well, but you got to listen to Coach Prime. And after that Utah game, he said Pat Shermer and Shedeur Sanders communicate really, really well, and you need your quarterback and OC to be on the same page. I get the impression that wasn't the case with Sean Lewis and Shedeur, but if it is with Pat Shermer and Shedeur, that's an upgrade right there.
Man, here again, I'm loving Brian Howell today, because you nailed it spot on, my friend. When you look at what a quarterback needs around them, that support system in the headset, drawing up the plays, there has to be communication and confidence between those two people. And this is not, disparaging to Sean Lewis. There are a lot of reasons why two people may not click, and it doesn't mean either party is wrong. Sean Lewis has moved on now to San Diego State as a head coach again, so congrats to him. But during that season, once Coach Sherman got there as an analyst, you could see that he and Shedeur had a different level of communication, a different level of understanding with each other that allows Shedeur just to click better and perform better under that. And I know in this market space, man, a lot of Broncos fans are Colorado Buffs fans and, have some misgivings about Sherman's days there. But people grow, people change, people develop. Environment is everything. And I think Coach Sherman is in an environment working with the Coach Prime in Boulder that he ain't the guy he used to be and never is going to be that guy again. And he's totally embracing what he has in the locker room and in the toolkit with Shor Sanders. And you could see even in those final games, we may not have won the games, but the offensive production, the offensive flow of the game got tremendously better. And I think because we were doing things that not only accentuated what a Shedeur brought to the table, but also was able to help those out there that didn't bring as much to the table and protect them. One of the things Sean Lewis used to do was a fast-paced offense. Well, when you got an offensive line that's already shaky and getting winded, you're also giving the defense the advantage by doing that because you're forcing your O-line to do something they can't do. When Sherman took over those play calls as co-offense coordinator, slowed down a little bit, got a little bit more methodical, but the production went up numbers-wise, including in the run game. So I like where we're headed with Coach Pat Sherman. And again, I think that the biggest thing you got to take away from this is what helps Shedeur Sanders be all that he can be at a baseline, but also grow him. And if that means Pat Sherman's OC, Pat Sherman's going to be OC.
Yeah. And people got to remember too that Sherman was calling plays for the last 4 games, but we didn't see 4 games of Sherman and Shedeur. We saw, 2.5 games really. And I look at those games as game 1 is kind of a feeling out process. You're playing a good defense in Oregon State. You didn't do a lot offensively, but that was it was the first game together. The second game together, you're playing a good Arizona team. You put up 31 points and it looked pretty good. And then the third game, Shedeur gets knocked out about 10 plays in. And so you didn't have a chance to really do games 3 and 4 together. And so they've really only had a couple of games together, and game 2 was much better than game 1. I feel like with the whole offseason together, if Sherman is the OC and Coach Prime hasn't officially announced, he just keeps saying it's likely. But if they're together for a full offseason, I like what those two can do together. And then defensive side, Neely, they still got some work to do. They've got some stuff they got to get in the transfer portal and whatnot. But I like some of the pieces they're getting there too. Chidozie Nwoku from Houston, a great run stuffing nose guard. They need that, obviously. They got to stop the run.
Man, there it is. It's that simple. If you look at that, we were in these games with the talent offensively with Shedeur Sanders. We were also right in those games, even though our defense, had a couple of breaks. They went beyond bending and broke. Several of our games, man, had we just given up 2 less runs. Some of those games you gave up 200 yards rushing, 80 of those yards were on 2 plays. Yeah. And so you take away those kind of stats, and you're right there with Georgia and Alabama as far as defensive proficiency. So what did Coach Prime go out and do? First thing on defense, bring in some run-stopping defensive linemen because we know we have talent at the secondary. We know we have talent at linebacker, although we're going to be adding to those rooms as well. The first place you had to do was bulk up that defensive line in size and talent because we have to stop the run because we can't have those back-breaking plays where a guy runs for 80 yards just as you were stopping them on 3rd down. And I think that's been addressed, and I think the defense is going to hold people to less points. You have several players coming back who are now even more familiar with Charles Kelly's system. So this defense is going to be special, man.
Yeah. And there's so much time between now and next season. There's going to be a lot more movement and things like that. We're going to talk more about it, hopefully, as the season goes along. But I think that the Buffs are off to a good first, about 3 weeks, I guess, of the off season. I think they're off to a good, start to the off season. And I think this is building.
Arrow is absolutely pointing up for December. This is the new wave of college football, Brian, as you know, and your listeners out there know. This roster is going to change some before the spring game. This roster is going to change after the spring game. This roster is going to change some right before we go into fall camp. Because when you look at the transition of people coming and going, look at new portal dates and people graduating from their current schools in May and wanting to go to grad school, different places. And that ain't discounting even having walk-on tryouts at some point. So you're going to have some subtractions and additions to this roster. But if you had to measure it right now, this team is built much better than it was built last year. with key people in place. You still got Shor Sanders, still got Travis Hunter. You've added some people to replace Zay Weaver. You've picked up a tight end. You've revamped your offensive line totally, added some pieces to the defensive line. And then that's on the field. Look at what you got. You lose a guy like Nick Williams to Syracuse, but Vincent Dancy, who's been a head coach, played defense in college himself, close defense, coach defense as well, been joined at the hip with Charles Kelly for a year and Dennis Thurman for a year. He's going to do a phenomenal job with the edge rushers and the outside linebackers. So I'm looking forward to what the defense does, man. I think it's going to be complementary football to the changes on offense.
Yeah. And boy, we haven't even mentioned guys like Jimmy Horn Jr. is coming back, and Alton McCaskill should be healthy, and Dylan Edwards will be a year older, and hopefully more ready to make a bigger impact for 12 games. So I think there's a lot of exciting things about this, and hopefully you'll join me a couple more times at least during the offseason. We'll talk more about it, but we're less than a week away from Christmas, so I want to wish you Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and any traditions. I know your kids are older, but any traditions that the Neely household has on Christmas?
Well, I think this Christmas we're starting a new tradition because we finally got a grandbaby in. So this is my grandson's first Christmas. He won't remember it, but it's going to be all about him to some degree. And other than that, man, we're going to Mom's house to eat because Neely don't miss meals, whether I'm in Boulder or Mississippi. So same to you and your family, man. Merry Christmas to you guys. And, of course, looking forward to more chats with you during this off season. Going to be plenty to talk about with Colorado football because Coach Prime ain't done. And I think you remember, Brian, he shied away, from talking about wins and losses early on, all throughout the offseason and the season. But here's a guy who stood up in front of Buff Nation right there on campus during that premiere and said, we're getting Miss Peggy a bowl game. I believe it. He believes it. And he has a reason to believe it because he knows what's coming and what it's going to do to change this team. So look for more wins in 2024.
Awesome. Well, we'll look forward to more wins and also more chats with you. So we'll chat with you soon, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, bro.